I'm Melvin L. Raymond, attorney and counselor at law. Welcome to Raymond Law Live. We invite you to tell us what topics you would like us to cover in future broadcasts. Just let us know. Contact us on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Raymond Law Live. Or you can contact us by email. That's mraymond, attorney, at sbcglobal.net. Or you can contact us on Twitter. That's Twitter at Raymond Law Live. Also, during the broadcast, if you have any questions or comments, you can post them on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Raymond Law Live. Are you a grandparent? Grandparents have historically played an important role in our families and in our culture. Grandparents, you'll be glad to know that you do have visitation rights. Most of the 50 states have statutes or laws granting grandparents visitation rights. Missouri, of course, is one of those jurisdictions that has a statute or law granting grandparent rights. That is our topic for today, grandparent visitation. Now, what is the right of a grandparent as to visitation? Here in Missouri, grandparents are allowed reasonable visitation of a minor grandchild under age 18 years old. And there are four circumstances where grandparents are allowed reasonable visitation. The first circumstance is when the parents of the child have filed for a dissolution of marriage. In that case, where there is a divorce case pending, a grandparent may intervene in any dissolution of marriage action and seek an order from the court granting them visitation of grandchildren. Now, it is necessary for a grandparent to intervene in the divorce proceeding in order to secure their rights of visitation. A grandparent can also seek to modify an original order of dissolution of marriage or an original divorce decree with respect to visitation and seek an order granting them visitation when a parent has denied visitation to the grandparent. The second circumstance when a grandparent can get visitation is when one parent of the child is deceased and the surviving parent denies reasonable visitation to a parent of the deceased parent of the child. Again, the second circumstance when a grandparent can obtain visitation is when one parent of the child is deceased and the other surviving parent denies reasonable visitation to a parent of the deceased child. The third circumstance is when the child has resided in the grandparent's home for at least 6 months within a 2-month period immediately preceding the action to filing of the action to get grandparent visitation. So that's 6 months within a 2-year period before the grandparent brings a court proceeding seeking a granting of visitation of a grandchild. The fourth circumstance when a grandparent can obtain visitation is when a grandparent is unreasonably denied visitation with the child for a period exceeding 90 days. Now, there is an exception to this rule, and that exception to the rule about denial of visitation for 90 days is if the grandparents' natural parents are legally married and living together with the child. The idea there is that the court does not want any unreasonable interference with the parent's right, excuse me, of visitation. So those are the four circumstances when a grandparent is entitled to visitation. Furthermore, and this is important, grandparents have the right of reasonable visitation regardless of the marital status of the parties. So even if the parents of the child are not married, and even if the father of the child has not acknowledged paternity or has not paid child support, nonetheless, the grandparent has a right of visitation. Now, Missouri laws permit a grandparent also, and this is important as well, they can seek court order for mediation at the request. You have to submit the request to the Associate Circuit Court here in the state of Missouri. The Associate Circuit Court, of course, is the lower court. And you don't need an attorney if you want to, let's say there's a dispute about, or you've been denied visitation, you can seek mediation to be ordered by a court establishing grandparent visitation without an attorney being involved. You can just do that on your own. The request, of course, has to be submitted to the court in writing by the grandparent seeking an order of visitation. Should a grandparent file a written request for mediation to the court, then the grandparent, of course, is responsible for paying for the proceeding to obtain an order for mediation. And then the court will appoint a mediator, and the mediator will work with the parties, the parents, to work out a visitation schedule for the grandparent. Now, the court will only grant visitation to grandparents when there is a finding that such visitation will be in the best interest of the child. Now, this is very important. If it is found that the child's best interest will not be served by the visitation, then the court will deny the visitation. So again, the court is primarily concerned with the best interest of the child with respect to any visitation issues. That's also true in the case of parents or a non-custodial parent who is seeking visitation of the child. The best interest of the child is always the court's paramount concern. Now, when will a court find that visitation is not in the best interest of a child? It could be in cases where the visitation by a grandparent, and for that matter a parent, will endanger the child's physical health or impair the emotional development of the child. If the court finds either one of those things, then visitation will be denied. We will take your questions or comments about the topic today, so just post them. Now, unlike the non-custodial parent, grandparents do not have an automatic right to visitation. What does that mean? It means that the burden is on the grandparents to show that they have met the requirements of the statute and that visitation is in their grandchild's best interest. Now, the requirements of the statute, I mentioned those earlier. Those were the four circumstances when the court will grant grandparent visitation. Those four circumstances that I mentioned during the beginning of the discussion. So all those have to be met, and the grandparent has to intervene and provide evidence to the court that the visitation would be in the child's best interest. That's very important. Now, while the Missouri law, and this is true for the laws in other jurisdictions, it does give the right of grandparent visitation, but it does not give them the right to temporary custody. As compared to parents, the parents have the right not only to visitation, but also temporary custody. Now, even though grandparents do not have the right to temporary custody, the court can grant overnight visitation to a grandparent and also weekend visitation to the grandparents if such visitation is deemed by the court to be reasonable. So it's not improper for a court to grant as reasonable visitation weekend and or overnight visitation. That is not uncommon in my practice for grandparents to be granted weekend or overnight visitation of their grandchildren. Since the rights of grandparent visitation is statutory, it's very important that a grandparent who is seeking visitation of the grandchildren comply with the requirements of the statute, because it's a little more involved than the parent right, non-custodial parent right visitation. So it's very important that the grandparents meet the statutory requirements. Now, as far as adopted children, the visitation rights of a grandparent may terminate upon the adoption of a child. That is the law. The exception to this rule occurs if the child is adopted by a step-parent, another grandparent, or another blood relative. So unless that occurs, there is an adoption of a child by a step-parent, another grandparent, or other blood relative, then there is no grandparent visitation right. That's very important. And today it does happen that there are adoptions and the natural grandparent do not have the grandparent rights of visitation with adopted children. The adoption would cut off grandparent visitation. Now, what happens when the grandchildren move with the parents to another state? They leave the home state with the parents and move to another state. Or the grandparents may move from their home state to another state. So is there a right to enforce grandparent visitation when that happens, when the grandparent moves to another state or the grandchild moves to another state? Well, the answer is yes, the grandparent visitation can be enforced in the state where either the grandchild moves with the parent or if the grandparent is the one who, grandparent or grandparents are the ones who move to another state. And this is true or has been true since 1988 under the Federal Visitation Rights Enforcement Act. Under that law, the courts in various states in the country are required to recognize and enforce visitation orders obtained by the grandparent from any state. So there's a move, and that does happen often. There's a move, then the grandparent visitation can be enforced in the state to which the grandparent moves or the grandchild moves. Now, the action to enforce grandparent visitation, if there's a move, will be in the court in the county of the court, in the court of the county to which the child moves. So where the child lives governs where you can enforce the right of visitation if there is a move. So keep that in mind should that happen. And it does happen frequently that parents may move or grandparents may move. So those are some of the main points about grandparent visitation. It's always helpful to obtain counsel, to intervene, since the burden is on the grandparent to establish visitation, and that the visitation will be in the best interest of the child. It is advisable to obtain the assistance of counsel if a grandparent is seeking to intervene to obtain grandparent visitation. And that does happen typically if there's those four circumstances that I just mentioned: denial of visitation for 90 days, and there's an issue with respect to the grandparent not having visitation. Keep in mind that the grandparent visitation is not as extensive as, of course, the right of the non-custodial parent for visitation and also temporary custody. But it's important to know, if you're a grandparent, that you do have you're entitled to visitation with your grandchildren, minor grandchildren, and that's a right that the courts have recognized. That's a right that the courts want to foster, and you can go to court if necessary, to enforce that right. Circumstances do arise where it may be either desirable for a grandparent to seek visitation. So hopefully this information has been helpful to you. And again, if you have questions or comments, you can post them on our Facebook page. So that concludes our discussion about the topic for today. I did want to mention that I will be appearing in person this coming Saturday, May the 11th, at the Julia Davis branch of the St. Louis Public Library. That's this coming Saturday, May 11th, from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. I will be appearing at an open forum, so you have opportunity to meet me in person. And since it's an open forum, you have the opportunity to ask questions about any topic that you feel that you want information about, any topic that may be relevant to your needs or relevant to the needs of someone else. It's very important for you and your loved ones to have information about your legal rights, because it's always good to know things. So when the need arises, then you have some knowledge about consultation with an attorney, or even when you need to consult with an attorney, even if you don't in the end retain an attorney, the attorney can provide you with information. So I invite you all to meet me on Saturday, this coming Saturday, May the 11th, at the Julia Davis branch of the St. Louis Public Library. The Julia Davis branch is located on Natural Bridge Avenue near Newstead. So I hope to see many of my followers and my audience there this coming Saturday, May the 11th. So I want to thank you all watching this broadcast live, and those of you who will watch the broadcast later, for tuning in and for your interaction. You can contact me if you need representation, or if you have comments or questions, you can reach me by going to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Raymond Law Live. Or you can email us at mraymond attorney. That's MRAYMONDATTORNEY at sbcglobal.net. Or you can tweet us at Twitter at Raymond Law Live. And finally, you can contact us at our office. That's area code 314-534-2800. And remember, when you fight, know your rights. See ya. Thank you for listening.